SBC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
The UEFA Euro 2024 championships have concluded on a somber note that football will not be coming home to England. The end of the 6-week tournament marks European gambling entering its summer break as bookmakers lower betting activities and regulators enter recess periods. Yet prior to this well-earned break, Europe saw developments on western and eastern fronts. In Italy, the ADM has submitted its official plans to launch a new regime for online gambling concessions, priced at a hefty €7 million per licence. Whilst in Croatia, a new government has pledged to fast-track a gambling overhaul, bringing in stringent player protections and market controls. I'm Martyn Elliott, and welcome to today's edition of iGaming Daily, brought to you in partnership with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalises player experiences with Optimove. And, as a special offer, they're offering new clients a free first month. For more information and to claim that free first month, go to optimove.com/SBC. Now, joining me today to discuss all things European is SBC's Content Director, Ted Menmuir. Hi, Ted, how are you?
Very well, Martin. Disappointed, but I'd like to begin by reading to our audiences Rudyard Kipling's If. So, Martin, yes. You know, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blame it on you, then one day you will be a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only line I know.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, sadly, it was actually somebody who's technically not yet a man who was making a big difference in the final. Spain's 17-year-old winger who, you know, what a sensational player that young lad is. Really looking forward to, and I am clutching at straws here, but I'm really excited by what he might achieve over the next few years and watching him play, even if that does reduce England's chances of winning a major tournament even further. But there we are. I couldn't help noticing, Ted, that you seem to have themed this, the subjects for today around Gareth Southgate's greatest defeats, with Italy and Croatia on the agenda.
Again, it proves what I said. Gareth Southgate is cosmic, and he is divine, and he rules everything around me this summer. I'm sorry, audiences. Yeah,
that's true. I'm going to, for the first time, express a little bit of sympathy for Southgate. You know, we all know his tactical approach is cautious and so on, but it wasn't his fault that some of the players couldn't make simple passes or control the ball and so on last night. It was just a bad night all round, I think. So I'm going to give him a bit of a pass. He's the best England manager of my lifetime in terms of results. Although I did prefer watching the team when Terry Venables and Bobby Robson were manager, but.
We'll just end it by saying Southgate forever.
Yeah. Well, until the end of the week, anyway. And then, but hands off Eddie Howe is the main message the FA needs to take from this. Right, I suppose we should actually talk about something gambling related for once.
Sure.
We've talked a lot about elections and football the last few weeks, so let's return to our stock in trade, I guess. So the first half of the show, we're going to talk about Italy, and then we're going to talk about Croatia a bit later on. So let's start with Italy then. So why is it so important for Italy to sort of launch this new licensing regime for what is already sort of quite a large online sector they have there?
Yeah, good question. So I think this is reflective of kind of like generational issues that have happened in Italian gambling, especially with regards to the online market. So the mechanism in how the ADM granted its original online concessions has been a point of conflict for over a decade since Italy brought its online gambling regime in 2011. And when it launched the regime, it launched it in very kind of loose terms with regards to licensing, in terms of what are the exact terms of play, how the concessions are granted, and the longevity of the actual licenses in themselves. And over the past 5 years, as the licenses have been kind of reaching an end, and there's been a lot of legal challenges, it's a point of conflict for the industry, in which has kind of blocked the legal passages for the operators to kind of reapply. And it needed kind of the central government to kind of intervene, take away the mandate from the ADM and say, look, we're now going to launch a new regime. The regime has been kind of kept out of the actual kind of reorganization decree, but once it undertakes its final assessment, it will then be integrated with the rest of the decree. You have to remember that in Italy, the government operates, or when it wants to change mandate, it has to do it via a decree. So everything's kind of implemented in phases, and this is a critical phase for the reorganization of Italian gambling. It's sorting out online gambling licenses. Sure,
and obviously the sort of the headline part of this is the fee, €7 million, which is a 35 times increase on the concessions back in 2018, I believe. So why have they gone for something that's just so expensive, such a huge increase?
So the £7 million license, and okay, it's a £7 million license, but it's spread over 9 years, right? And the license fee was endorsed or was approved by MEF, the Ministry of the Economy and Finance of Italy. And they believe that that is now reflective of a market in which it's starting to see kind of that level of saturation, but it's dominated by gambling PLCs such as Flutter. Flutter, I mean, Sisal being part of Flutter, Entain, 365, Schneitek, and SKS. Lottomatica, new Lottomatica. The other thing is that it's also going to reflect kind of the transition of what's happening to Italian gambling, which is going very much from retail to online. So the growth factor, or the growth segment of Italian gambling, is that online transition. That is where the operators are competing, and that's the vertical that should face higher taxes or higher licensing fees. The licensing fees have caught the attention, or they have divided opinion in Italian gambling. A lot of people believe that it is kind of an intervention by the government to mold the industry in a certain way, getting rid of smaller competition and kind of putting the boundaries in favor of the larger enterprises. But we'll see how that plays out. There's definitely a lot of tough questions regarding licensing and whether kind of smaller operators can compete in the market.
Yeah, it seems to be a trend across Western and Northern Europe at the moment to move towards models where small players are really going to struggle the economy, just even to afford the not just the license fee, but all the regulatory support and so on they need. So it'd be interesting to see how this plays out in one of the big established markets here. Do you think this represents this proposal represents sort of real progress for the market?
I think the important question is that, look, Italy is sticking to a program. This the reorganization of gambling needed to take place over 15 years ago, and at least Italy is going in one direction. I think that overall, one of the positive things is that the government is tackling the hard questions. So even in the one of the reasons why they need a new regime is because they need to kind of sort out the issue of skin gambling in Italian online gambling, which has become kind of an unlicensed, a very exposed vertical to the black market. And again, if these measures work, one of the things is that Italian gambling's exposure to the black market is circa $1 billion a year.
Wow.
So if that kind of comes into play, that's a great growth area for the licensed market. And that is an area for them to compete with. And actually, when you reflect back on the £7 million fee, if it's £7 million fee to compete in a market that can get an extra $1 billion, that is to the interest of the operators. So it's positive all round. Yeah, there are elements of the unknown, but that always comes to play when a government overhauls its laws.
Yeah, well, there's always a fear of changes in any industry, I think. So, when you couch in those terms about the bigger market opportunity, it certainly looks good. So, final question on this: do we know timescales yet, or
the timescales is this concession? The online gambling regime, once it passes its EC approval, it's between 3 to 4 months to begin the implementation of measures from the decree to come in. So all the Italian licenses have been warned about the process. It's coming up for its final review. It will be kind of indoctrinated into the reorganization decree. And again, as mentioned, this is the first important phase of that decree going forward.
Sure. Okay. Well, so overall, and real positive signs in Italy. So we will leave the market in Italy for the moment, and when we come back after the break, we will be making the short journey across the if my geography was better, I'd know what the sea was there, wouldn't I? Is it the Aegean, I think, over to Croatia? But anyway, we will be talking about Croatia when we come back after the break.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Okay, welcome back to part 2 of today's iGaming Daily, when we will be looking at potential changes coming up in the gambling market in Croatia. So, Ted, just to begin with, the Prime Minister made a pledge last week, and it was fairly detailed in there, but sort of why has it happened now? What sort of grounds has the Prime Minister had to come out and make this announcement?
So Croatia's in a period of kind of political flux. It had its general elections in May because the coalition government basically dissolved. There was no kind of harmony there. And Andrej Plenković called a snap election in which he sneaked in a majority, but confounded kind of with a minority partner. But he does now carry a mandate. And one of the pledges there was that he is going to reform or overhaul Croatia's Gambling Act, and he's gonna implement it on the grounds that there's been a lot of concerns by local mayors, municipal councillors on just the overall exposure of Croatian citizens to gambling to gambling.
Okay. And presumably around that, I think you half mentioned it there in your answer. Sort of player protection and fears about a rise in problem gambling are driving this kind of discussion.
Yes. So, look, I mean, in writing this article and having kind of contact with people on the ground in Croatia, one of the things that it's Croatian gambling, it's in a very kind of tricky place at the moment. It is a growing industry. It does contribute to the economy. Overall, people do look at kind of it as a net positive. However, you're talking about a gambling regime that hasn't been revised since its implementation. The other factors here is that, again, like we witnessed in other Eastern European jurisdictions, there is such a difference between rural communities versus urban communities in terms of spend and GDP. And talking to one of our Croatian partners, they said that one of the concerns there is that in certain towns there are more betting shops than there are bakeries or there are kind of retailers. It's definitely an agenda that needs to be viewed by the government. And the other high is a high index of gambling addiction in Croatia, which is 40,000 citizens are registered or have gone to the healthcare services, noting that they are at risk of gambling addiction, which index is amongst the highest in Europe.
Yeah, population's not that big in Croatia, is it? 4 million-ish, I think, something like that.
Yes.
So that is a significant chunk of people, and I guess in that case, so you can understand the motivation, the motivation behind moves to sort of tighten up the regime there. There's a lot of detail already in this, and obviously the headline is again related sort of advertising and a fairly strict new code on that. But it's not the only thing. Do you think there's a chance that the Croatian authorities will sort of achieve this sort of high proficiency of controls that they're aiming to implement here?
Good question. Again, you've got to revert back to, if you break down, there is a lot of high proficiency of technical controls, but also centralized controls. And that's always a hard objective to achieve for any government. And we can see that this can take even for Western governments, that can take over a period of a year or to 2 years. Especially when it comes to player registries, which is one of the mandates that the Croatian government wants to implement, a player registry, and then from which it will then build a very kind of comprehensive self-exclusion monitor for the industry. Again, the Ministry of Finance has said that they believe that gambling should be monitored more by the centralized government than it is at the moment over kind of online and land-based verticals. We'll have to see. Again, this is a draft decree, so we have to see in terms of what timeline they want to fast track in there, and how they're going to schedule or kind of modify the provisions to follow.
Sure, and I guess just to conclude on this, because I know you mentioned timelines. They're very keen to get this through, the government has publicly expressed a desire to get these measures through as quickly as possible. If you look at the wider roadmap in Croatia, how does it mirror other sort of Eastern European nations?
I think 2024 has been a transformative year for the majority of EU nations, and if you look at Romania, they're going to go into a revision of their gambling laws, and it started with kind of a prohibition on rural towns having gambling venues. I don't think that Croatia have gone that extreme. If you look at Bulgaria and Romania again, they're revising their gambling laws with regards to advertising. They want to kind of implement a stricter code. Not necessarily blanket bans, but really tighten up advertising policies in terms of when gambling advertisers can be streamed, on what mediums, also kind of online protections. So it's you got to take kind of each nation on an individual basis, but the market is getting more restrictive. And again, I think it points towards like which operators can undertake the quickest transitions and accommodate adjustments and change to those regulatory practices. I don't think it differs between the West and East in how the terms of play are stipulated across markets. No, it's there's a very clear direction of travel across the industry in Europe, I think, isn't there? And it's probably, we talk about the details quite a lot, and the people we talk to have, working operators have very strong views one way or the other on all these things. But is it just a sign that the online market is maturing? It's still a relatively young industry, but putting in these sort of levels of controls and so on is just a sign that it's becoming more established and a more important part of the economy in a lot of these places. Yeah, looking back, Eastern Europe is still very much, and I think for a lot of Western operators, it's still viewed as a market of, a growth. These are viewed as growth markets, right? But I I think like in their strategy now, they just have to counter for kind of regulatory factors that they've already done in Western Europe. So if you're going to launch in one of these markets, right, how much of a factor will advertising restrictions be? How much will be a tougher kind of compliance mandate that you have to accommodate? Gambling's never easy, right? But I think these are kind of calls that you now have to like really, really deeply analyze in your business strategy. And again, I think the cost of market entry will go up. But look, gambling PLCs are gambling PLCs, and they can't. It's no longer about just accommodating one market, as we've seen, kind of, with the likes of FDJ going for Kindred. International growth has to be in everyone's profile, and it's a tough nut to accommodate, but they have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the case. So, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Ted, to talk all things Italian and Croatian. You've covered these stories on SBC News, and we'll put some links in the show description. And I know you'll be covering these along with your team, these stories along with your team for the next few months, until these the new regulatory regimes reach fruition. But also, thank you for listening, and we'll be back with another edition of iGaming Daily tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.